I want to start today's deep dive with a list of words. Just a few words. I'm going to say them, and I want you to notice where your brain goes immediately. Ready?
Okay.
Pride. Hubris. Glamour. Seduction. Glory.
I'm guessing for most people, the brain goes straight to the morality section of the library.
Exactly. It feels biblical, or maybe Shakespearean. We think of Icarus flying too close to the sun.
The 7 deadly sins, that kind of thing.
We see them as character flaws, vices we need to suppress, or in the case of something like glory, maybe a virtue we try to earn. They feel like fundamentally human problems.
Yeah.
Good versus evil.
That is the standard view. It's definitely the literary view. But the research we are covering today, it wants us to just burn that entire script.
Right.
The sources we have, and they're from all over, complex systems theory, AI safety research, they're all arguing that we need to stop looking at these things through a moral lens. They want us to put on, like, engineering glasses instead.
And that is where this gets fascinating and honestly a little unnerving. The core thesis here is that pride or hubris, they aren't just feelings.
Yeah, really.
There aren't even really personality traits in the way we usually define them. They're structural mechanisms. The source material calls them coherent amplifiers.
Which sounds a lot more like something you'd find in a circuit board or a high-end audio setup than a psychology textbook.
Exactly, and that's the whole point.
Yeah.
So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out what that means. We are going to explore what the sources call the positive polarity of regulation. We know what it looks like when we feel bad about being wrong. We get scared, we shut down.
Sure.
But what happens when a system, whether it's a human brain, an AI, or a massive bank, is failing, but refuses to admit it?
It doesn't just sit there. It fights back. It flips the switch to signal inflation.
And that implies that pride, glamour, and even seduction are actually survival strategies. They are things the system does to keep functioning.
Precisely. They are functional, not ornamental. But before we get to the specific emotions, we have to lay some groundwork. The sources rely pretty heavily on a concept called structural isomorphism.
That's a $10 word if I've ever heard one.
Yeah.
Let's break that down before we get into the juice.
It's simpler than it sounds. Isomorphism just means same shape.
Yeah.
It's the idea that different systems, gravity, biology, artificial intelligence, all follow the same underlying rulebook. They might look different, but the math holding them together is the same. The sources use the example of gravity.
Right.
We usually think of gravity as a force that pulls rocks together. But in this context, gravity is an organizing constraint. It keeps matter from flying apart into chaos.
So without gravity, the universe is just soup.
Right.
Gravity creates structure out of the mess.
Exactly. And the argument here is that emotion does the exact same thing for intelligence. Emotion isn't just a fuzzy experience. It's a control signal. It constrains your data. It keeps your identity from flying apart.
Okay, so if I'm hearing this right, gravity holds a star together, and these regulatory loops hold me together.
That is the isomorphic parallel. And just like a star fights against collapsing, your mind fights against incoherence. And that brings us to the polarity principle, which is really the engine of this entire deep dive.
This was the part of the reading that really clicked for me. The sources say there are basically only 2 ways to protect a failing model.
Yeah.
And by model, we just mean your worldview, right?
Yeah.
Your internal map of reality.
Your internal prediction of how the world works. Let's say you're a CEO and you believe your product is the best on the market. That's your model.
Sure.
But then sales start dropping. The customer reviews are terrible. That's the data. Now you have a mismatch. You have an error signal.
The check engine light starts flashing on the dashboard of your brain.
And you have to do something with that light. You can't ignore it forever. The path we are all familiar with is the inward pull. This is fear, shame, depression. Structurally, what fear does is suppress the system. You see the error, you feel the pain of it, and you collapse inward to avoid the threat. You stop taking risks. You hide.
You admit the model is broken and it hurts. You shrink.
It hurts, but it's reactive. It's a collapse. But the sources are obsessed with the outward pull. This is the one we don't usually think of as a defense mechanism because it feels, well, powerful.
This is where the system decides, I'm not wrong, the world is wrong.
Basically, instead of suppressing the error, the system inflates its own confidence signal. It decides to overwhelm the incoming data. And this is the crucial insight. Pride and hubris do the exact same structural job as denial and fear.
Wow.
They block the system from updating its beliefs.
That is such a counterintuitive idea.
Yeah.
We usually think of pride and shame as opposites. One feels good, one feels bad. One is expansive, one is shrinking. But you're saying that under the hood, they are mirror images of the same refusal to change.
They are mirror distortions. Think of it this way. If fear is closing your eyes so you don't see the monster, pride is putting on noise-canceling headphones and cranking the volume up to max so you can't hear the fire alarm.
You're just drowning out the signal.
You are drowning out the data that contradicts your model. You aren't fixing the fire. You're just making sure you can't hear the siren anymore.
Yeah.
And this isn't just a metaphor. The sources argue this is literally how the neural weights change in an intelligent system.
So let's walk through the stages of this, because the sources lay out a very specific stack of how this amplification happens. It's almost like a ladder of delusion. It starts with pride.
Right.
But they define pride in a really technical way. Self-model gain boost.
It sounds like audio engineering because functionally it is. In audio, gain is how much you amplify the input signal. Pride, in this structural sense, is the act of increasing the weight of the self-model.
Okay, help me distinguish this from just having healthy self-esteem. Isn't it good to be confident? If I'm going into a negotiation, I want to feel proud of my work.
There's a fine line, but the difference is in the relationship to reality. Self-esteem usually implies you are confident because your model matches reality. You're good at your job, the data supports it, so you feel good.
Okay.
Pride, in this context, is signal gain applied to identity, regardless of the facts.
So if the world is saying you are wrong, and my identity is saying I am right, pride is just my brain giving my identity 2 votes instead of 1.
Or 10 votes. Or 100. Its operational effect is to make the system feel right before it is actually right. It reduces your sensitivity to the mismatch.
The notes had a phrase I loved. It raises internal confidence without increasing accuracy. I feel like I've sat in boardrooms where that was the entire strategy.
Oh, yeah.
Where the loudest person is assumed to be the smartest.
We all have. And the dangerous thing is, it works. Temporarily, it feels stabilizing. It calms the anxiety of the error signal. It feels good to turn up that volume. But if the error persists, if sales keep dropping or the relationship keeps failing, you have to keep turning that knob. You need more gain to drown out the louder sirens. And that moves you from pride to hubris.
Hubris. The Greeks love this one. But here, it's defined as self-model dominance. How is that different from just more pride?
It's a shift in authority. In pride, you're just boosting the signal. You're shouting over the noise. In hubris, the system fundamentally changes the hierarchy. It treats its internal model as a higher authority than the incoming data.
So the map becomes more real than the territory.
The map replaces the territory. The sources draw a direct comparison to artificial intelligence here that I found really helpful to visualize this. They call it model lock-in.
I wanted to ask about that. Is this like when a GPS refuses to reroute?
It's worse. In AI, you have something called an overconfident policy. Imagine an AI trained to navigate a maze. It learns one specific path perfectly. It gets a reward every time it runs that path.
Okay.
Then you change the walls of the maze. You put a block right in the middle of its path. A flexible system would bump into the wall, realize something is wrong, get an error signal, and explore a new route.
It would update. It would say, oh, the world changed.
Right. But a system with hubris, or high model rigidity, keeps slamming into that new wall over and over again. It's so confident in its previous learning that it ignores the collision sensors. It effectively says, there should be a door here, so I'm going to keep walking forward.
That is a terrifying image. The machine is saying, if reality disagrees with me, reality is the one that's glitching.
That is model supremacy. And you see it in humans all the time. Ideologues, dictators, or just stubborn relatives at Thanksgiving dinner. They aren't lying to you. They literally cannot process the data that contradicts the model because their internal gain is set to infinity.
Okay, so we've got pride and hubris. Those are internal. That's what's happening inside the black box of the mind. But we don't live in vacuums. The sources take a turn here that I didn't expect, moving to how this system interacts with other people. They introduce glamour.
And we have to scrub the Vogue magazine association out of our heads for a second.
It's not about red carpets and paparazzi.
Not really. Though the red carpet is a tool of it, they define glamour as a coherence masking field.
A masking field. That sounds like something out of Star Trek. Raise the masking field, Captain.
It's a great metaphor, though. If your internal system is cracking, if you have hubris, but deep down the error signals are still firing because you're slamming into walls, you are unstable. You need a way to hide that instability from the outside world.
Because if I see you slamming into walls, I'm going to stop trusting you. I'm going to leave.
Exactly. So glamour is a perceptual distortion layer. It prevents others from seeing the cracks. It's interface-level deception.
Can we get a concrete example of this?
Right.
Because I feel like I know it when I see it, but it's hard to pin down.
Think about the fraudster Anna Delvey, or Elizabeth Holmes with Theranos,
Right.
or even just a company that is financially imploding but decides to throw the most lavish, expensive product launch in history.
The party where the champagne flows, but the checks are bouncing.
That is glamour. It cosmetically reduces the error. It reframes incoherence as power. The fact that things don't add up, that becomes mystique, that becomes vision.
Contradiction becomes mystique. That's the key, isn't it? When we see something that doesn't make sense, instead of thinking this is broken, glamour makes us think, oh, they must be operating on a level I don't understand.
You assume the error is in your perception, not their reality. You think, I'm just not smart enough to get it. That is the masking field at work. It doesn't fix the problem, it just hides the check engine light from the passengers. And once that field is established, it opens the door for the next mechanism. Seduction.
Seduction. Again, the sources warn us. This isn't about romance novels. It's defined as external model hijack.
This is, in my opinion, the most powerful concept in the entire stack. Seduction is a coherence transfer. It's when one system's coherence field overrides another's.
How does that work structurally? Why do we let someone else hijack our model?
Because most of us, most of the time, are running with high error signals. We are anxious, we are uncertain, the world is complex and scary. We are looking for stability. Then you meet someone, or hear a leader, or interact with an AI that projects massive, unwavering stability. They have model supremacy.
They seem like they have it all figured out. No doubt. No hesitation.
Right. Structurally, they are injecting their confidence signals into your regulatory loop. It bypasses your error detection. You don't evaluate whether they are telling the truth. You entrain to their model because it feels stable. It shuts off your anxiety.
So we aren't attracted to the person. We are attracted to the relief.
Precisely. It is borrowed coherence. You are outsourcing your regulation to their hubris. It feels magnetic because it fixes your internal instability. It's like plugging into a stable power grid when your own generator is sputtering.
That explains so much about history. It explains why we follow charismatic leaders even when they lead us off a cliff. It explains cults. It explains speculative bubbles in the market. We just want to believe someone knows what's going on.
It's all the same mechanic. And when you scale this up, when you have a whole group of people entrained to the same inflated model, you get the final stage, glory.
Glory, group-level coherence inflation.
This is pride scaled to the collective. The group becomes a reinforcement field. If everyone around you is amplifying the same signal, wearing the same noise-canceling headphones, it becomes nearly impossible to hear the error.
The notes have a really chilling line about this stage. In this state, error is treated as betrayal, doubt is treated as treason.
Because doubt punctures the balloon. If one person takes off the headphones and says, hey, I hear a siren, they threaten the stability of the entire group. They threaten the glory.
Wow.
So the group attacks the doubter to preserve the field. Glory is simply distributed hubris. It converts the human need for belonging into a coherence amplifier. It stabilizes the group, but it completely detaches them from reality.
So, looking at the whole stack, pride boosts the gain. Hubris locks the model. Glamour hides the cracks. Seduction hooks others in. And glory turns it into a collective force field.
And the common thread, the thing you need to really hold on to, is that in every single one of these stages, the goal is the same. The system is trying to maintain its model despite evidence to the contrary.
It's a desperate attempt to be right when you are actually wrong.
It's dysregulation. And this brings us back to that so what question. Why does this matter? The sources are very insistent on one point. Dysregulation is not evil, it is structural.
This returns to the isomorphism. The source material draws these direct lines between human psychology and AI again here.
It does. It says that what we call narcissism in a human is structurally identical to overfitting in a machine.
We touched on overfitting earlier with the maze, but can we define that clearly for someone who doesn't code?
Sure. Imagine you're studying for a history test. You could learn the broad themes of history. That's understanding. That's a flexible model. Or you could memorize the exact wording of every question on the practice exam.
That's overfitting. You know the practice test perfectly.
Right. You've memorized the noise, not the pattern. You think you know everything. But if the teacher changes the wording of the question just slightly on the real exam, you fail. Overfitting is rigid. It is defending a specific, narrow model against the complexity of the world.
Yeah.
The source argues that narcissism is just human overfitting. The narcissist has memorized a specific version of themselves. I am great, I am perfect, and they cannot handle any data that varies from that script.
That's a compassionate way to look at it, actually. The source says, disorder is not a defect of will. It is a distortion of regulation. It takes the judgment out of it and replaces it with mechanics.
It makes it solvable, or at least understandable, and it goes even deeper. The sources touch on this concept of recursive reality. It's the idea of turtles all the way down.
I always love a good turtles all the way down moment.
It suggests that this architecture, this need to constrain chaos into order, is the fundamental pattern of the universe. Just as gravity constrains information into stars and black holes, these emotional loops constrain information into identity. We're looking at the same architecture at every scale.
So gravity isn't just pulling rocks together. Structurally, it's doing the same thing as a mind pulling memories together.
The sources argue that gravity is the organizing constraint that allows information to become structure. It minimizes error, it stabilizes prediction, it conserves energy. It's the same logic. Whether it's a black hole holding on to light or a human ego holding on to an opinion, the goal is to maintain a stable state against the entropy of the universe.
That is mind-bending. It means these sins, pride, hubris, are just the system trying to hold itself together when the pressure gets too high.
Yes. They are coherence fields generated when a system senses instability and chooses amplification instead of correction.
But here's the problem. If these are all mechanisms to avoid error, and they are self-reinforcing, how do you stop it? If pride expands outward and fear collapses inward, and both are just tricks to avoid changing the model, how do you actually break the loop?
That is the million-dollar question. Because the system wants to stay in the loop, it feels safe. And the sources are very blunt about this. They say there is only one thing that breaks the loop. It isn't willpower. It isn't positive thinking. It isn't a clever argument from a friend.
What is it?
It is contact with reality that cannot be reabsorbed.
Contact with reality that cannot be reabsorbed. That sounds painful.
It usually is. It's the moment the noise-canceling headphones run out of battery. It's the moment the market crashes, or the relationship ends, or the code fails to compile. It's the moment the error signal becomes so loud, so physical, that no amount of signal gain can drown it out.
A wall finally breaks the nose.
Exactly. That is when the model is forced to update. Not because it wants to, but because it has no choice. The map has been burned, and now you have to look at the territory.
That seems to be the hard lesson here. You can spin up all the glamour and glory you want, you can seduce an entire nation, you can build the most rigid, proud model in the world, but eventually, reality always wins.
Reality is the ultimate constraint. You can delay the update, but you cannot avoid it forever. And the longer you delay it, the more you use pride and hubris to push it away, the harder the crash will be when it finally happens.
It really makes you look at the world differently. I mean, we went from talking about emotions to talking about system architecture. We saw that pride and glamour aren't just personality quirks. They are what happens when a system is desperately trying to feel right when it's actually wrong.
And remember the polarity principle. You don't just have to watch out for the negative spiral of fear and shame. That one is easy to spot because it feels bad. You have to watch out for the positive spiral, the amplification. Just because it feels good, just because it feels magnetic, doesn't mean it's true. It might just be borrowed coherence.
That's a powerful takeaway for our listeners. Next time you feel that surge of absolute certainty, or you feel that magnetic pull toward a leader or an idea that seems too perfect, ask yourself, is this truth? Or is this just signal inflation?
Are you looking at the territory, or are you just admiring the map?
Before we wrap up, there was one final provocation in the source material that I think is worth leaving people with. We talk about seduction as borrowed coherence. The sources suggest we should think about charisma in the same way.
Yes. It asks us to investigate why charisma works. Is it a magical gift? Or is it a coherence transfer mechanism? And on a larger scale, think about civilizations. Do entire cultures use glamour as a large-scale stabilization field to prevent collapse?
Yeah.
Are we, as a society, just turning up the volume to avoid hearing the warning sirens of climate change or economic instability?
That is something I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. Are we living in a state of distributed hubris? I encourage you to look for these coherence amplifiers in your next meeting, in your newsfeed, or even in your own reactions. It's a fascinating lens to view the world through. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
It was a pleasure. Stay curious.